What's up, everyone? Pusha Wheat Catan here. Happy New Year, and making a video today that I've been very excited about, following the 1v1 Name the Kid challenge. I am doing a video today on crushing 1v1 Catan and getting 60+% win rates consistently. If this is your first time viewing the channel, we were doing a challenge to try to get a 75% win rate in order to name my friend's firstborn kid, Gurias, a name generated by colonist.io. But a 62% win rate is still one that will put you in the leagues of some of the best to play 1v1 Catan. And I wanted to do this video as a deep dive on the learnings that I had from playing these 8 games in the 1v1 challenge, and some of the really nuanced strategies that you can use that will give you an actual edge over some seasoned players playing 1v1 Catan. So let's hop into it. My first tip here is one that is pretty universal with Catan, which is maximizing your production. And the thing that is different, though, is that you really want to focus on doing that through your number spread and through your ports in the game. In 4-player Catan, there's often things that you need to consider, like space for building roads or what other players are going to be taking. But since there's only 2 players that are placing and you really need to make the most of the resource production, you should really be looking at this more as a mathematical equation. Looking at 2 of the games that I won, you could see I am always in the lead for resource production for those victories, and it is not even close. You could see from some of these winning games, even this one where I got plowed, I still have access to the 5, 9, 8, and soon the 6. And all this city building material plus the ore port means that I am using it efficiently, and I'm building up cities left and right to really outpace my opponent. And doesn't it look sweet when all of that ore comes home when you've got the port to trade it in? So you want to make sure when you're doing this, you have that 5, 6, 8, and 9, almost like a checklist. And if it's not settled originally, that you can do it within one road. And if there is an overpowered resource on the board, aim to port that, because that will make you even more efficient with your production. Tip number 2, build efficient roads. You want to make sure that you can have longest road within reach, and oftentimes in 1v1, that comes down to all 15 pieces that you have available on the table. You are going to be building a ton, you're going to be producing a ton, and you want to make sure that when it comes down to it, you have not taken away your own ability to get longest road because you built roads in the wrong direction and didn't connect them together effectively. You can see here in game 4 with the final pick, I'm placing on the 639, which is a good spot for me, but I'm also intentionally having the entire bottom part of the board available, and there's no way that my opponent can cut me off. Looking later down the road, you can see how this ends up playing out, and I do have a completely efficient road network here. There's not one wasted space, and I'm able to settle along the way efficiently. I am not cutting myself off for any placement spots, and my opponent here, they did build a road network out to a port, but they left 2 of their roads just on an island, unavailable for them to connect. And when it comes down to it and we're fighting for these last couple of points here for the victory, I know that I have a completely efficient network, and they are building up even towards that split on the 10 is not going to allow them to have the full 15 roads available for them to keep longest road. In this case, it doesn't come down to that full 15, but the point still stands. If it needed to be done, I still would have gotten the victory there and held on to those 2 points. So for you, make sure that you are pre-planning your connection route with those roads. Make sure that you can get there without having to waste anything, and that you're settling with effective spacing along the way, and you don't get to an awkward spot where you have nowhere to settle because you ended up placing too close together with your settlements. Also, make sure that you're mindful when an opponent makes a mistake or cuts themselves off. That means that you don't need the full 15 roads to keep it, and then you can branch off and be able to place somewhere and still be able to hold on to longest road. 1v1 is a lot about doing math and making sure that you can understand when there are small corners that you can cut, like if somebody doesn't have a road and you have held onto that, and you can focus on other parts of the game that you need to develop, like buying dev cards. Which brings me to my next point, and this is a segue to tip number 4, the final tip, which is probably my favorite, so stick around to the end to hear that one. But tip number 3, pop. Make sure that you are buying dev cards early and often. This lets you keep control of the night, which is hugely important, especially if there's a single point of failure for an opponent's resource when they can't trade with you. It's also going to allow you to pick up game-changing dev cards, and ultimately, those who are not buying development cards are not going to win this game. I'm going to look at one of my actual losses, but still one that I think illustrates this point, because this game was way closer than it had any business being, because we are looking here and it is 12-12, and my opponent has not bought a single dev card in this game. And you can see I am in control of largest army. I have slowed them down significantly, even though I have been cut off and have no possibility to get longest road. But I have largest army in hand. I have been holding back their production this entire time, and I have 3 victory points in hand. So even though on paper my opponent has me dead to rights without any possibility of me taking back longest road, I have made this game close, and I've made it interesting by not focusing on roads and completely leaving that out of the equation, only sitting up and buying as many development cards as I can. And you know that there are 5 effective points, now 6 when I pull that 4th victory point, that are off the table for my opponent, as well as things like road buildings and years of plenty that come up along the way by just buying development cards and allowing me to do the maximum that I can to control the game, slow down my opponent's production, and maximize the chance of getting game-changing development cards. And speaking of game-changing development cards, this brings me to my last tip, probably my favorite strategy that I've uncovered in 1v1 Catan, which is the defensive monopoly. If you are doing your job and buying development cards early and often, then the monopoly will pop up. You're going to draw almost every card in the deck every game. And so when you get this, how are you going to use it? In 4-player Catan, oftentimes you are using that as an offensive strategy to generate more resources. And in this game, a lot of the times you're going to be producing a ton on your own just because of the nature of 1v1 and building so many cities. So my favorite way to use a Monopoly card is as a defensive tactic. So this one has you really paying attention to your opponent and what they have in their hand. You really need to be locked in for this one. But you can see I draw my Monopoly and I am thinking, how can I use this right now when the opponent and I are pretty much in a dead heat to be able to keep myself ahead, keep an edge, and be able to win this game. And you could see here when I roll, my opponent got most of the city in production. And so I use this right now to take away those 3 ore and ensure that they can't build a city and I can. This piece of maneuvering is essential because the difference between me building that city and my opponent building that city is a huge amount of production for them in the long term. And when it came down to locking down this win, I had 4 cities while my opponent only had 3. And that early production was huge in locking this down. You could see here my resource production was 108 to their 72. And a huge part of that comes from me being the person that built the city and them not building that city, all because we used a monopoly for 3 cards instead of waiting for an end game scenario where we would take 10 of something that they had already produced, for example. It's a very different dynamic for 1v1 here rather than how you would use it in a 4-player game, but that's why I wanted to share those tips. I think this is really something, and all 4 of these tips are something that can really give you an edge when you're playing 1v1 Catan and get you over 50% win rates and up to the 60s. I learned a ton from this 1v1 challenge and playing these games over and over again. These are some of the nuggets that I've taken, but I'm curious from those who are seasoned veterans or who play 200 plus games per season, What tips have you found? What makes you successful? Please let everyone know in the comments so that we can all get better at the game. But until then, this is Pusher Wheats Catan. Thank you for watching the series, and I hope you guys learned a ton, had fun watching these games, and stick around to learn more as we continue to do more challenges and play more Catan in 2025.